My name is Vincent Miller, and at 68 years old, I discovered that the son I sacrificed my entire life for, the one who called me useless at every opportunity, doesn't carry a single drop of my blood. I found out right as Ethan, the boy I held in my arms since he was a newborn, demanded a DNA test to speed up the division of the small inheritance I worked so hard to build. Today, I'm sitting at my kitchen table holding the test results in my trembling hands. The envelope is already open, but I keep staring at it as if the words inside might change. 40 years of working double shifts at the steel mill to give him an education. 40 years of enduring his scorn and humiliation, all to find out he isn't even my son. The morning started like any other. I got up at 5 a.m., made coffee, and sat down to watch the news on the small TV in my kitchen. My routine since I retired. The peace was shattered by the doorbell. It was too early for visitors. "Open up, Dad! I know you're awake." Ethan's voice always sounds impatient when he speaks to me. I opened the door and there he was, in his expensive suit and a watch that surely cost more than all my years of salary combined. "Good morning, son," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "I don't have time for pleasantries," he replied without looking at me, walking straight into the living room. "Jessica and I need to sort out the land issue once and for all." My small plot of land on the outskirts of the city, I bought it 30 years ago with my savings, thinking I'd one day build something to leave to him. Now, Ethan wants to sell it to expand his real estate business. "I've told you I don't want to sell it yet," I explained, offering him coffee. "It's all I have left." Ethan waved away the coffee with a sharp gesture. "For God's sake, Dad, what are you going to do with that land? Build a palace at your age? You've always been useless at business." His words hit me like they always do, but I'm used to it. Ever since he was a teenager, he started treating me this way, as if my factory job, my calloused hands, and my high school education were something to be ashamed of. "It's my land, son, and I want to think it over." "There's nothing to think about. Jessica already has the buyers, and we need to close this fast." He pulled some papers from his briefcase and spread them on the table. "Just sign here. We'll give you a cut of the money, don't worry." A cut. But the land is entirely mine. Ethan let out a dry laugh. "Dad, let's be realistic. Who found the land? Who contacted the buyers? Who did all the work? Jessica and I did. You just hold the title and you don't even know what it's really worth." Just then Jessica, my daughter-in-law, walked in. I hadn't heard her arrive, but now she was there with her perfectly styled hair and long red-painted nails. "Good morning, father-in-law," she said with that smile that never reaches her eyes. "Has Ethan explained the papers to you?" "I was just telling him to stop making things complicated," Ethan answered. "But you know how he is, always putting up roadblocks." Jessica sat down and looked at me intently. "Mr. Miller, I understand you're attached to that land, but think about it. What would you do with all that money? You could travel, see new places. At your age, you should be enjoying life, not worrying about property." Her words sounded kind, but there was something calculating in her eyes. I'd noticed it ever since Ethan first brought her home. "I just want time to think it over," I replied firmly. Ethan slammed his palm on the table. "There is no time. The buyers are waiting for an answer today. Why do you always make everything so difficult?" "It's my decision, son, and I prefer to wait." I saw Jessica place a hand on Ethan's arm as if to calm him. They exchanged a look, and she gave a slight nod. "There's something else we should discuss then," she said in a soft voice. Ethan shifted in his chair. "Yes, Dad. To speed things up, the lawyer suggested we do a full analysis of the inheritance. Since you don't want to cooperate on the land, we'll have to do things formally." "Inheritance? But I'm still alive," I protested. "It's a preventative measure," Jessica explained, "to get everything in order." Ethan pulled another document from his briefcase. "We need you to take a DNA test." The request caught me completely off guard. "A DNA test? What for?" "The lawyer says it's best to avoid future problems," Ethan answered, avoiding my gaze. "It's a simple formality." Something in his tone set off an alarm. There was more to this. "Why would you need to prove you're my son? Do you doubt it?" Ethan and Jessica exchanged another look. "It's not that," she intervened. "It's just to have everything legally sound. The birth certificates are old and sometimes there are complications. It's better to be safe." I didn't buy their explanation, but I decided to play along. Maybe this way I'd find out what they were really plotting. Fine, I'll do the test if it gives you peace of mind. Ethan seemed surprised by my quick agreement, but quickly regained his composure. Perfect. I've already arranged everything. We can go to the lab right now. You had it all planned out? Of course, Dad. You always have to be prepared. The lab was a 20-minute drive. On the way, Ethan talked on the phone about business while Jessica scrolled through her phone. They ignored me completely, as usual. I wondered when my son began to see me as an obstacle instead of a father. I remember when Ethan was little. He was 5 when he asked for a bicycle. We didn't have enough money, so I worked overtime for 3 months to buy it for him. His smile when he saw it is one of my most cherished memories. When did we lose that connection? The lab procedure was quick. A saliva swab, some forms, and that was it. The technician told us the results would be ready in 3 days. We need them by tomorrow, Ethan said. I'm sorry, sir, but the standard procedure. Ethan pulled several bills from his wallet and discreetly handed them over. Could you make an exception? The technician glanced at the money and nodded. You'll have them tomorrow morning. On the way back home, I noticed Ethan was unusually quiet. Normally, he'd be talking about his deals or criticizing my decisions. Something wasn't right. Why the rush with the tests, son? I already told you it's for the paperwork on the land. A DNA test has nothing to do with selling a piece of land, and you know it. Ethan slammed on the brakes and turned to me. You want the truth? Fine. The land is worth a lot more than you think. There's a government project to build a new highway right through that area. The value will triple as soon as it's officially announced. And what does that have to do with the DNA test? I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the steering wheel. The lawyer suggested we tie up all loose ends. If something were to happen to you, I don't want any problems with the inheritance. I didn't believe him. He was hiding something else. The next day, Ethan showed up at my house with an envelope. No greeting, no courtesies. He just handed it to me and sat on the sofa watching. Open it, he said. The envelope contained the test results. I opened it slowly, not understanding what he expected me to find. I read the document once, then again. The words seemed to dance before my eyes. Probability of paternity, or widow. This must be a mistake, I stammered. Ethan looked at me with a mix of triumph and contempt. It's no mistake. I had 2 different tests done to be sure. I felt the air leave my lungs. For 40 years, I had raised this man as my son. I had endured his scorn, his humiliations, all for the love I had for him, and now I find out he's not my biological son. Did you know, I asked, my voice breaking. I suspected, he admitted. A few months ago, when Jessica and I started looking into the land, we found some old documents at Aunt Carol's house. What documents? Letters between my mother and her. Apparently, there was some kind of agreement when I was born. I didn't understand all the details, but they mentioned something about a solution for everyone. Diane, my wife, passed away 10 years ago. She never spoke of any agreement, any secret. How could she hide something like this from me? Why didn't you tell me when you found those letters? What for? I preferred to confirm my suspicions first. Ethan got up and walked to the window. Besides, this changes everything regarding the land and the house. Of course, it all came down to property, to money. What do you mean? It's simple, Vincent, he said, using my first name instead of Dad for the first time. If I'm not your biological son, I legally have no right to inherit anything unless you formally adopted me, which you never did because you thought I was your natural-born son. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You made me take a DNA test to take my property from me. No, I had you take the test to clarify the situation. His voice was cold, calculating. Now that we know the truth, we can make a deal. A deal? You can sign over the deed to the land to me right now, and in return, I won't publicize the fact that my mother deceived you for 40 years. Imagine the scandal in the neighborhood. Everyone talking about how good old Vincent Miller was who raised another man's son. The cruelty of his words left me breathless. This man, to whom I gave everything, was threatening to humiliate me publicly. How can you talk to me like that after everything I've done for you? Ethan let out a contemptuous laugh. What you've done for me? You mean your miserable factory salary? The basic education you gave me? Everything I have, I've gotten on my own, in spite of you and your mediocrity. You were always a dead weight, an example of what I never wanted to be. Every word was like a knife. I thought of the nights I stayed up when he was sick, the meals I skipped so he could eat well, the overtime I worked to pay for his college. I raised you as my son. And that was your mistake, not mine, he replied. Sign the papers and let's be done with this. He slid the documents for the land deed across the table. My hands shook as I looked at them. I need time to think. There is no time. Either you sign now or tomorrow the whole neighborhood will know that the respected Vincent Miller is a... I didn't let him finish. Get out of my house. What did you say? I said get out now. Ethan looked at me, stunned. He didn't expect this reaction. Don't be an idiot, Vincent. This is your only chance to come out of this looking good. You may not be my biological son, but I raised you for 40 years. I gave you everything I could. If that means nothing to you, then I don't ever want to see you again. He stared at me for a few seconds, assessing if I was serious. Then he snatched the papers with a sharp movement. You'll regret this. I promise you. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard it shook the walls of my modest house. I was left alone with the test result in my hands and a world of unanswered questions. Who is my real son? Where is he? Does he know the truth? How could Diane hide this from me our entire life together? I sat in my old rocking chair, the same one where I used to rock Ethan as a baby. Tears began to fall, and I couldn't stop them. 40 years of my life dedicated to a son who wasn't mine and who now treats me like a stranger. Worse, like an enemy. But through the pain and confusion, a spark of determination began to grow inside me. If Ethan isn't my biological son, then somewhere out there is the boy who is. My real son, lost for 4 decades. I have to find him. I have to know the truth. I got up and looked for the bot where I keep Diane's mementos, letters, photos, documents. Maybe there I would find a clue about what really happened 40 years ago at that hospital, about who my real son is and where he might be now. The search wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt I had a clear purpose. To discover the truth, to find my son, and maybe, just maybe, have the chance to know the genuine affection that Ethan never gave me. As I was sorting through the old papers, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, but finally answered. Mr. Miller, a woman's voice said, my name is Teresa Goodman. I was a nurse at City General Hospital when your wife gave birth. I need to speak with you urgently. It's about your son, your real son. My real son? I asked, my voice cracking. What do you know about him? There was a short silence on the other end. I could hear the woman's ragged breath. I can't talk about this over the phone, Mr. Miller, she finally replied. Could we meet in person? It's complicated. I glanced at the clock. It was only 11 a.m., but it felt like days had passed since Ethan stormed out. Where can we meet? There's a diner near the hospital. It's called the Corner Diner. Do you know it? Yes, I know it, I answered, remembering the place where I used to have coffee while waiting for Diane to finish her checkups. How about 2 p.m.? I'll be there. I hung up and stared at the phone as if it could give me more answers. Who was this woman? How did she know what I had just discovered? And most importantly, what did she know about my real son? I opened the box of Diane's memories again. I went through old photos, greeting cards, documents. There was a yellowed folder with Ethan's birth papers. I opened it and examined the birth certificate. Everything seemed in order. My name was listed as the father, Diane's as the mother. Nothing suggested any irregularity. Among the papers, I found a small notebook. I recognized it immediately. The diary Diane kept during her pregnancy. I opened it with trembling hands. Maybe I would find a clue here. The first few pages were filled with excitement. Diane described her morning sickness, the first time she felt the baby move. She talked about the names we were considering, the plans we had. It all seemed normal, the diary of any excited mother-to-be. But as I read on, I noticed a change in tone. From the 7th month onward, the entries became more spaced out and less detailed. There were mentions of complications, of worries. Diane wrote about frequent doctor's visits, about fears she didn't share with me to avoid worrying me further. The last entry was from the day before the delivery. It was written in shaky handwriting. "Tomorrow our son will be born. Dr. Evans says it will be an emergency C-section. I'm more scared than I've let on to Vincent. There are complications I don't fully understand. If something happens to me, no, I mustn't think like that. Everything will be fine. Dear God, protect my son, protect my Vincent. Forgive me, my love, for what I've had to do. Someday you'll understand it was for our own good." I closed the diary, feeling a chill. What did she mean, forgive me for what I've had to do? What did Diane do that required my forgiveness? My memory of Ethan's birth is hazy. I remember the agony of waiting, the endless hours in the hospital corridor. I remember a serious-looking doctor telling me there were complications, that both Diane and the baby were in danger. I remember signing consent forms without barely reading them, desperate for them to save my family. When they finally let me see Diane, she was pale, exhausted, but smiling weakly. Beside her in a small bassinet was Ethan, wrapped in a blue blanket. "He's your son," a nurse told me as she placed him in my arms. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I checked the time. It was time to get ready to meet Teresa Goodman. I took a quick shower and put on my good clothes, a pair of gray slacks and a light blue shirt Diane had given me for our last anniversary. Before leaving, I tucked Diane's diary into my pocket. I also took the DNA test results. I didn't know if I'd need them, but I felt I should have them with me. The bus ride to the diner took longer than usual. It stopped at every corner, as if the world was conspiring to delay the moment I would learn the truth. Or maybe it was just my anxiety, making every minute feel like an hour. I arrived at the corner diner 15 minutes early. It was a small, cozy place with wooden booths and old photos of the city on the walls. I sat at a table in the back where I could see the entrance. I ordered a black coffee while I waited. At 2 p.m. sharp, the bell on the door chimed. A woman in her 60s entered. She had gray hair tied in a bun and wore a simple beige dress. Her eyes scanned the room until they met mine. I recognized in her gaze the determination of someone with a clear purpose. She walked to my table and offered her hand. "Mr. Miller, I'm Teresa Goodman." I stood to greet her. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Please have a seat." Teresa sat down and placed a small purse on the table. The waiter came over and she ordered a tea. "How did you know about the DNA test?" I asked directly once we were alone. Teresa sighed. "My nephew works at the lab where the test was done," she explained. "When he saw your name and the results, he called me immediately. He knows I worked at City General for over 30 years and was there when your wife gave birth." "So it's true? Ethan is not my biological son?" "No, Mr. Miller, he is not," she confirmed in a soft voice. "But there is much more you need to know." Teresa opened her purse and took out a yellowed envelope. "I've kept this for 40 years, waiting for the right time to do the right thing." She slid it across the table to me. When my nephew told me about the test, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I opened the envelope with shaky hands. Inside were several photographs and documents. The first photo showed a newborn baby with an identification bracelet. Another photo showed a younger Diane, exhausted in a hospital bed, holding a baby. Next to her was a man who wasn't me. "I don't understand," I murmured. "Who is this man?" "His name was Arthur Thompson. He was the brother-in-law of Dr. Evans, the doctor who attended to your wife." I picked up one of the documents. It was a copy of an original birth certificate, different from the one I had. My name appeared as the father, Diane's as the mother, but it was crossed out and had notes in the margin. "When your wife went into labor, there were serious complications," Teresa began to explain. "The baby was in a difficult position, and the umbilical cord was compromised. Dr. Evans decided to do an emergency C-section, but the situation was still critical." I vaguely recalled those hours of anguish waiting in the hospital hallway. At the same time, in another room, Arthur Thompson's wife was also giving birth, Teresa continued. Her delivery was normal, without complications. She gave birth to a healthy boy. I felt my heart race. Your wife's baby, your biological son, was born with respiratory distress. He needed specialized care that the hospital didn't have at the time. Dr. Evans was desperate. He was a personal friend of your wife's family. What are you saying exactly? I asked, though I was beginning to guess the answer. Teresa took a sip of her tea before continuing. Dr. Evans proposed a deal to your wife, to swap the babies, the Thompson's son for yours. He argued that your son probably wouldn't survive without specialized care, and even if he did, he might have permanent disabilities. He told her it was better for everyone. You would have a healthy son, and the sick baby would get the care he needed at a private hospital the Thompsons had access to. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Diane agreed to switch our son? How could she make a decision like that without telling me? And my son? What happened to my son? I asked, my voice breaking. He survived, Mr. Miller. Against all odds, he survived. Teresa pulled out another, more recent photograph. This is Sebastian Thompson, your biological son. The photo showed a man about 40 years old with a remarkable resemblance to me at his age. Same chin, same eyes, even the shape of his ears was identical. There was no doubt. He was my son. Where is he now? Does he know the truth? He lives in Austin. He's a mathematics professor at a university, Teresa replied. And no, he doesn't know anything. The Thompsons never told him the truth, just as your wife never told you or Ethan. How do you know all this? I was in the room when the swap was made. Dr. Evans asked me to help. Teresa looked down, ashamed. I was young, inexperienced, and the doctor was my boss. I didn't dare refuse, but I could never forget it. For years, I've followed the lives of both boys from a distance. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I was afraid. Dr. Evans was a powerful man with important connections. Besides, when I saw both children were growing up well, I convinced myself that maybe it had been for the best. She paused. But I could never shake the guilt. When my nephew told me about the day test, I knew it was time to make things right. I looked at Sebastian's photo again. My son. My real son. How can I find him? Teresa took a notepad from her purse and wrote something down. This is his address and his phone number. She handed me the paper. But Mr. Miller, you must think carefully about how you approach this. It's news that will change his life forever, just as it has changed yours. I carefully put the address in my pocket, as if it were the most valuable treasure. There's something else you should know, Teresa added. Arthur Thompson and his wife died 3 years ago in a car accident. Sebastian is their only child. He's alone now. Alone, like me. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said to Teresa. You don't know what this means to me. There's one last thing. Teresa took a smaller envelope from her purse. Diane gave this to me before she died. She asked me to give it to you if the truth ever came out. She said it would explain her reasons. I took the envelope. My name was written on it in Diane's unmistakable handwriting. I never had the courage to give it to you before, Teresa admitted. But now it's yours. We said goodbye at the diner door. Teresa gave me a brief hug. I hope you find peace, Mr. Miller, and I hope you get to meet your son. I watched her walk away down the street, a woman who had carried a secret far too heavy for far too long. I decided not to go straight home. I needed a quiet place to read Diane's letter. I walked to the small park where we used to go on Sundays when Ethan was a boy. I sat on a secluded bench under the shade of an oak tree and carefully opened the envelope. My dearest Vincent, if you are reading this, it means you have finally discovered the truth I have kept for so many years. I don't expect your forgiveness, only that you try to understand why I did what I did. That night in the hospital, I thought I was going to die. The complications were severe. I lost so much blood. When our son was finally born, I barely got to see him before they whisked him away. Dr. Evans came back a short while later. He told me our little boy was very sick, that he needed special care the hospital couldn't provide. He explained there was another couple, the Thompsons, whose healthy baby was born at the same time as ours. He proposed a switch. He said our son would have a better chance of survival with the Thompsons, who had access to better hospitals. He assured me the other baby was healthy, strong, and that you would never know the difference. I was weak, scared, and convinced I wouldn't survive. I thought of you, of how you would suffer losing your wife and possibly your son too. I agreed to the deal, believing it was the only way to ensure you would have a family even if I wasn't there. But I survived, Vincent. I survived to face the consequences of my decision every single day. So many times I wanted to tell you the truth, but fear held me back. Fear of losing you, fear of losing Ethan, fear of the legal repercussions. Dr. Evans warned me that what we had done was illegal and that we could all go to jail if it was discovered. As Ethan grew, I sought out news of our real son. Dr. Evans gave me occasional updates. He assured me he was well, that the Thompsons loved and cared for him as their own. I tried to console myself by thinking that both boys had better lives because of my decision, but the guilt never left me. Sometimes when Ethan treated you so badly, I wondered if our real son would have been different, if he would have valued your kindness, your sacrifice, the way Ethan never did. I cannot change the past, Vincent. I cannot undo what I did. But I can ask that if you ever find our son, you tell him his mother thought of him every day, that what I did was not out of a lack of love, but out of a desperate and misguided love. I loved you until my last breath, Vincent. I am so sorry I failed you in this way. Forever yours, Diane. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I folded the letter. After all these years, I finally understood. I don't condone what Diane did, but I can imagine her desperation, her fear. Would I have done anything different in her place? I rose from the bench, feeling a new weight on my shoulders. It was no longer just the weight of deceit, but also that of responsibility. What should I do now? Seek out Sebastian? Tell him the truth? And what about Ethan? Despite everything, I raised him as my son for 40 years. I can't just erase him from my life. As I walked back home, my phone rang again. It was another number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mr. Miller? A man's voice asked. My name is Raymond Ortiz. I'm a private investigator, and I believe we have a mutual friend. I don't know any private investigators, I replied, confused. Teresa Goodman contacted me. She told me you might need some help finding someone. I stopped dead in my tracks. You're talking about Sebastian Thompson. That's right. Teresa brought me up to speed. If you'll allow me, I'd like to help you. I hesitated for a moment. I had just received too much information in one day. I needed time to process it. Mr. Ortiz, I appreciate your interest, but I need to think. Could we talk tomorrow? Of course, he replied understandingly. Take all the time you need. Here is my number for when you decide to call. I jotted down his number and hung up, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. When I got to my house, I found the front door pried open. Someone had broken in while I was gone. Cautiously, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was a mess, drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. They had gone through everything. On the kitchen table was a note. The handwriting was Ethan's. I warned you that you'd regret this. This is just the beginning. Sign the papers for the land, or next time will be worse. You have until tomorrow. Rage washed over me. After everything I had done for him, after raising him as my son even though he wasn't, Ethan resorts to this. Threats, intimidation. I picked up the phone and dialed Raymond Ortiz's number. Mr. Ortiz, it's Vincent Miller. I've changed my mind. I need your help right now. What happened? Ethan broke into my house. He left a threat. I'll be there in 20 minutes, and he assured me. Don't touch anything, and don't call the police yet. We'll talk when I get there. I hung up and sat in the one armchair they hadn't overturned. In my hands, I held the photograph of Sebastian, my real son, the son I never knew. While I waited for Raymond Ortiz, I made a decision. I was going to find Sebastian. I was going to meet the son who was taken from me 40 years ago, and I was going to protect what little I had left from Ethan's greed. This time, I would not be intimidated. This time, I would fight for what was right. Raymond Ortiz was nothing like I imagined. I expected a rough-around-the-edges guy, maybe in a trench coat and fedora like the detectives in old movies. Instead, the man who knocked on my door was in his 50s, slim, with thin-rimmed glasses and perfectly trimmed graying hair. He wore a simple but elegant gray suit and carried a leather briefcase. Mr. Miller, a pleasure to meet you in person, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I'm sorry about the circumstances. I invited him in and he surveyed the mess with an expert eye. Have you touched anything since you got here? No, everything is just as I found it. Raymond nodded and took a small camera from his briefcase. He began to methodically photograph the chaos, the open drawers, the scattered papers, the forced door. Evidence, Winty explained as he worked. You never know when we'll need it. When he finished, he put the camera away and looked at me directly. Teresa told me the basics, but I need to hear your version from the beginning, please. I told him everything. The DNA test, Ethan's visit, the threats, my meeting with Teresa, the truth about the baby swap, Diane's letter. Raymond listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When I was done, he put his notebook away inside. You have a complicated situation on your hands, Mr. Miller. Legally, there are several issues at play. What do you mean? On one hand, there's fraud on the birth certificates. On the other, the matter of inheritance. And then there's the breaking and entering and Ethan's threats, he listed calmly. Not to mention the search for your biological son. I hadn't thought about the legal implications. My mind was focused on the emotional impact. What do you suggest we do first? First, we file a police report for the break-in, Raymond said, taking out his phone. I know an officer who can come by discreetly without a lot of fuss. While Raymond was on the phone, I picked up some of the scattered papers. Among them were old photos of Ethan as a child, birthday parties, his first day of school, family vacations. Moments I had thought were happy, but now saw through different eyes. Did he already despise me back then? Or did the contempt come later? The police will be here in half an hour, Raymond announced as he hung up. While we wait, let's talk about Sebastian Thompson. Just hearing my biological son's name stirred a mix of emotions I couldn't describe. Teresa gave me his address and phone number, but I don't know how to approach him. I understand your anxiety, Raymond said, sitting across from me. Showing up in his life to tell him he's not who he thinks he is could be a shock he might handle badly. I suggest a gradual approach. What do you have in mind? First, we need to know more about him, his current situation, his personality, if he's married, if he has children. Raymond opened his briefcase and took out a tablet. I did a preliminary search on my way over. He showed me the screen. There was an academic profile from the University of Texas at Austin. The photo matched the one Teresa gave me. It was Sebastian, my son. Sebastian Thompson, 40 years old, PhD in mathematics from MIT, currently a tenured professor in the College of Natural Sciences. Raymond read. He has several publications in specialized journals, seems to be well respected in his field. My son is a doctor, a university professor, an educated, intelligent man. I felt a mix of pride and sadness. Pride for his accomplishments, sadness for not having been a part of them. Is he married? Does he have a family? Raymond swiped his finger across the screen. According to his social media profile, he's married to Mariana Vega, who is also a university professor, but in literature. They have 2 children, Daniel, 2, and Laura, 8. I have grandchildren. The revelation took my breath away. Not only had I lost my son for 40 years, but my grandchildren as well. I want to meet them, I said with determination. I want to at least see them, even from a distance. Raymond looked at me with understanding. I get it, Mr. Miller, but we must be cautious. Sebastian has lived his whole life believing the Thompsons were his biological parents. The news that he was switched at birth could be devastating if not handled properly. I knew he was right, but the urge to meet my son, my grandchildren, was almost unbearable. So what's your plan? I propose we fly to Austin tomorrow. We'll observe Sebastian from a distance, assess his situation. In the meantime, I'll look for an appropriate time and place for a casual first contact. Casual? Yes, a seemingly chance encounter. Nothing threatening, nothing to raise suspicion. Just a friendly chat with a stranger who, unbeknownst to him, is his biological father. The idea sounded reasonable, though the wait would be difficult. And what do we do about Ethan in the meantime, Aunt? I asked. His threat has a deadline. Tomorrow we can file for a restraining order based on the break-in and the threatening note. That will buy us some time. The doorbell rang. It was the police. 2 officers, a man and a woman, took my statement and photographed the scene again. Raymond spoke to them privately, showing them something on his phone that I couldn't see. The officers nodded and assured me they would take the case seriously. Officer Mendoza is an old friend, Raymond explained after they left. He'll make sure the report is processed quickly. We'll have the restraining order by tomorrow morning. How do we know Ethan will respect it? We don't, but violating it would have serious legal consequences. I doubt he'd want to risk his reputation as a respectable businessman. We spent the next hour tidying my house and preparing for the trip to Austin. Raymond insisted I bring the original documents, the day test result, Diane's letter, the photos Teresa gave me. They are important evidence, he said, both for Sebastian and for any future legal proceedings. When everything was ready, Raymond got ready to leave. I'll pick you up at 7 a.m. tomorrow. The flight to Austin is at 9. Thank you for everything, Mr. Ortiz, I said sincerely. I don't know how I would have handled this alone. It's my job, he replied with a slight smile. And please call me Raymond. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. My mind replayed the events of the last 24 hours. In just one day, my life had been turned upside down. I had discovered that the man I raised as my son didn't share my blood, that my wife had hidden a devastating secret for decades, and that somewhere in Austin lived my real son, oblivious to all of this. The phone interrupted my thoughts. It was Ethan. Have you decided to sign the papers? He asked without a greeting. I'm not signing anything, Ethan, I replied calmly, and I suggest you don't set foot in my house again. I've filed a police report for breaking and entering. His dry laugh came through the phone. A complaint against your own son? You made it clear yourself. You are not my son. There was a brief silence. I see you've grown a backbone, Vincent. His voice was cold, calculating. But this is just beginning. Do you think a simple police report will stop me? You have no idea what I'm capable of. You don't scare me anymore, Ethan. You should be scared, he replied, because I'm going to take everything you have. And when I'm done, you'll wish you had signed those papers. Why so much cruelty? I asked. I raised you as my son. I gave you everything I could. Everything you could? His tone was mocking. Your everything was always mediocre, Vincent. While my friends' parents bought them new bikes, you brought me a used one. While they went to private schools, I had to settle for public. You were always a failure. His words hurt, but not like before. Now I saw clearly what I had refused to see for years. The ingratitude, the complete lack of empathy. I did the best I could with what I had, I responded with dignity. And if that wasn't enough for you, I'm sorry. But I will no longer let you humiliate or threaten me. You have until tomorrow to reconsider, he insisted. Otherwise, face the consequences. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at the phone, feeling a strange calm. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel fear of Ethan, but pity. Pity for the bitter, greedy man he had become. That night, I barely slept. My mind oscillated between the anxiety of meeting Sebastian and the worry over Ethan's threats. At 5 a.m., I got up, showered, and made a light breakfast. At 7 sharp, Raymond knocked on my door. Ready, Mr. Miller? Ready. The airport was a half-hour drive. On the way, Raymond briefed me on the plan. I've contacted a colleague in Austin. He'll help us with logistics. Sebastian teaches today from 10 to 12, and then from 3 to 5. We'll have time to observe him and plan our approach. Do you think I should tell him the truth right away? Raymond shook his head. No, that would be too abrupt. I suggest a gradual approach. Maybe comment on the physical resemblance. Strike up a casual conversation first. He was right. I couldn't just walk up to a stranger and say, "Hi, I'm your real father. You were switched at birth." It would be too great a shock. The flight to Austin was just over an hour. By 10:30, we were in a rental car heading to the university. Raymond's colleague, a man named Carlos, was waiting for us at the campus entrance. Sebastian is teaching in the science building, second floor, room 204, he informed us. He finishes at 12 and usually has lunch at the faculty cafeteria. Perfect, Raymond replied. Did you prepare what I asked for? Carlos nodded and handed him an envelope. Temporary IDs as visiting academics. They'll let you move around campus without raising suspicion. With our fake IDs hanging around our necks, we headed to the science building. We found a bench near room 204 and waited. My heart was pounding. In a few minutes, I would see my son for the first time in 40 years. At 12 o'clock, the door opened. Students started pouring out, young people in their 20s loaded with books and laptops. And then I saw him. Sebastian came out of the classroom talking animatedly with a couple of students. He was tall like me, but leaner. He had my nose, my eyes, the same way of gesturing when he spoke. There was no doubt. It was my son. I was frozen, unable to move or speak. Raymond put a hand on my shoulder. "Easy," he whispered. "Let's just watch for now." Sebastian finished his conversation and started walking towards the cafeteria. We followed at a discreet distance. In the cafeteria, he sat alone at a table by the window, pulled out some papers, and started reviewing them as he ate. Even in his smallest gestures, I saw reflections of myself. The way he frowned slightly when concentrating, how he held his fork, the way he ran his hand through his hair when he was thinking. "The resemblance is striking," Raymond commented. "There's no doubt he's your son." We sat at a nearby table, far enough not to draw his attention, but close enough to observe. I ordered a coffee I barely touched. My focus was entirely on Sebastian. What was his life like? Was he happy? What kind of father was he to his children? "Here's an interesting detail," Raymond said, consulting his phone. "According to the information I've gathered, Sebastian received a considerable inheritance after the Thompsons' death. Properties, investments, bank accounts. He's a wealthy man." The news surprised me. My biological son had grown up in a privileged environment, very different from the modest upbringing I could offer Ethan. And yet, Sebastian had chosen an academic life dedicated to knowledge, not to accumulating wealth like Ethan. "He seems like a grounded man," I commented, "dedicated to his profession." "He is," Raymond confirmed. "His colleagues describe him as brilliant but humble, loved by his students, respected by his peers." As we spoke, a woman with brown hair approached Sebastian's table. She was attractive, with a warm smile and an air of intelligence. Sebastian stood to greet her with a kiss. "That must be Mariana, his wife," Raymond whispered. I watched them interact, the way they looked at each other, how they touched hands across the table. There was an evident love between them, a connection I never saw between Ethan and Jessica. "They look happy," I said, feeling a mix of joy and sadness. "According to my sources, they are," Raymond confirmed. "A solid marriage, 2 children they adore, a full life." Seeing my son with his wife made me reflect. Did I have the right to burst into his life, to destabilize his world with a truth that could devastate him? The Thompsons had raised him as their own, given him a good life, loved him. What could I offer him? "Maybe we should go," I said, suddenly unsure. Maybe this was a mistake. Raymond looked at me surprised. "Are you sure? We came all this way." "Look at him," I said, discreetly pointing towards Sebastian and Mariana. "He has a good life, a family that loves him. What right do I have to disrupt all that?" "You have the right to know your son," Raymond replied firmly, "and he has the right to know the truth about his origin." Just then, Raymond's phone rang. He answered, and his expression turned serious. "I understand. Yes, we'll take the first flight back." "What's wrong?" I asked when he hung up. "That was my contact at the police department. Ethan has filed a complaint against you." "A complaint? For what?" "He alleges that you threatened him, that he fears for his and his wife's safety." "That's absurd." I exclaimed a little too loudly. A few people looked over, including Sebastian. I lowered my voice. "He's the one who threatened me." "I know, but he's found 2 witnesses to corroborate his story. The police want to question you." "False witnesses?" "Probably. Officer Mendoza says we need to return immediately to clear this up before they issue a warrant for your arrest." The news stunned me. How far was Ethan willing to go? "I can't believe it," I muttered. "What kind of person does that?" "A desperate one," Raymond answered. "Ethan must have a lot riding on that land deal." I took one last look at Sebastian. He was laughing at something Mariana had said, his head thrown back. His laugh reminded me of my own when I was young, before life hardened me. "We'll be back," I decided finally. "But this isn't over. When I solve this problem with Ethan, I will return. My son deserves to know the truth." We got up to leave, but at that moment, Sebastian also stood up. We accidentally bumped into each other in the aisle between the tables. The papers he was carrying scattered on the floor. "Excuse me," he said, bending down to pick them up. "My fault," I replied, also bending to help him. Our hands briefly touched as we reached for the same paper. Sebastian looked up, and for an instant, our eyes met. There was a moment of recognition, a spark of something indefinable. Can blood recognize blood? "Thank you," he said, taking the papers. "Are you new to the faculty? I don't recall seeing you before." "Just visiting," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "A colleague from another university." "Oh, interesting. In what field?" "Applied mathematics," Raymond improvised, saving the situation. "We're from the National Institute in Mexico." "Fascinating," Sebastian responded with genuine interest. "I teach advanced calculus and number theory. If you have time, you should attend my lecture this afternoon. It's in the main auditorium at 4. "We'd love to," Raymond replied, "but unfortunately we have to catch a flight back." "Another time then." Sebastian smiled, and that smile was like looking in a mirror to the past. "It was a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure was all mine," I managed to say. Sebastian nodded goodbye and returned to Mariana. Raymond took my arm and guided me toward the exit. "Are you okay, Mr. Miller?" "I touched him," I murmured. "I spoke with him. He's real." "He is," Raymond confirmed. "And you will see him again, I promise. But now we must deal with the more immediate problem." We left the campus in silence. My mind was torn between the push of having seen my son, however briefly, and the outrage at Ethan's latest betrayal. On the flight back, I watched the clouds from the window and thought about the turns my life had taken in just 2 days. I had lost a son who was never truly mine and found another I never knew existed. But above all, I had found a strength in myself I didn't know I had. I was no longer the docile old man who endured Ethan's scorn. I was no longer the resigned man who accepted his fate without question. Now I had a purpose: to meet my real son, to be a part of his life if he would have me, and not to let Ethan take away the little I had left. As the plane began its descent, I made a decision. I would fight for my dignity, for my land, for the chance to meet my son and grandchildren. And this time, I would not be intimidated. "There's something I don't understand," I said to Raymond. "Why is Ethan so desperate for that land? It's worth money, yes, but he already has so much more than I'll ever have." Raymond looked at me thoughtfully. "That's the key question, isn't it? What's so special about that land that makes it so valuable to him? Maybe we should find out." "How?" "I have some contacts in the urban development department. We could investigate if there's a project plan for that area that Ethan knows about and you don't." "Do it," I urged. "I need to understand why that land means so much to him that he's willing to destroy me to get it." The plane landed. As we collected our luggage, Raymond received another call. His expression told me the news wasn't good. "The police are waiting for us," he announced, hanging up. "They've issued an order to take you in for questioning based solely on Ethan's word. Apparently, the witnesses are convincing, and one of them is a retired judge, a friend of Jessica's family." "This is a nightmare," I muttered. "Don't worry," Raymond assured me. "We have proof that he threatened you, not the other way around. We'll get through this." As we walked towards the exit where the police were surely waiting, I thought of Sebastian, of his smile, of his eyes so much like mine, of the life we could have shared. "I'll be back," I promised silently. "I will find you again, my son, and this time nothing and no one will keep us apart." Just as Raymond said, 2 police officers were waiting for us. They were polite but firm. I had to accompany them to the precinct to give a statement. Raymond insisted on coming with me. "I'm his legal counsel," he told them, showing an ID I didn't know he had. "My client will not speak without my presence." The officers didn't object. On the way to the station, Raymond coached me in a low voice. "Don't worry, Mr. Miller. This is clearly a pressure tactic from Ethan. Just tell the truth, plainly and simply. I'll handle the rest." At the station, I was led into a small interrogation room. An officer took notes while another questioned me. "Mr. Miller, your son Ethan claims you threatened his life if he didn't back off from the sale of a piece of land. Is that true?" "Of course not," I answered, indignant. "He's the one who has been threatening me." I told them everything: the DNA test, Ethan's demands, his threats, the break-in. Raymond presented the photos of the ransacked house and the threatening note. As you can see, he said, my client is the victim here, not the aggressor. The senior officer examined the photos thoughtfully. Why wasn't the break-in mentioned in your initial report? Because it happened after, Raymond explained. The first report was filed yesterday morning. The break-in happened in the afternoon while Mr. Miller was out. The officers exchanged glances. There's something else you should know, Raymond added, pulling a folder from his briefcase. Mr. Ethan Miller is not my client's biological son. He was switched at birth, a fact my client only recently discovered. He showed them the DNA results in Diane's letter. They examined them with growing interest. This changes a lot of things, the senior officer commented. Do you have proof of his threats? Unfortunately, they were verbal, I replied, but my neighbor, Mrs. Jimenez, has seen him treat me with contempt many times. There's also the nurse, Teresa Goodman, Raymond added. She can confirm the baby swap and the fact that Ethan was aware of it before he started pressuring my client. After 2 hours, they let me go. There were no charges against me, but none against Ethan either. It was my word against his. Without concrete proof, there was little the police could do. At least we neutralized his maneuver, Raymond said as we left the station. He can't use the police to intimidate you anymore. What now? Now we find out what's behind Ethan's obsession with your land. Raymond took me to his office. While he made some calls, I noticed the framed photos on his desk. One showed a younger Raymond with a smiling woman and a little girl. Another showed the same girl, now a teenager, receiving a diploma. My family, he said when he finished a call. My wife passed away 5 years ago, cancer. My daughter is in college studying law. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Life goes on, he replied with a sad smile. His phone rang again. This time the conversation seemed more intense. Thanks, I owe you one, he said before hanging up. He turned to me, his expression serious. I think we found out why Ethan is so desperate for your land. What did you find? My contact in urban development confirms there's a government project to build a new shopping mall and residential complex in that area. The value of the land will multiply by 10 once it's officially announced next week. That explains his urgency. There's more, Raymond continued. Ethan is in debt up to his eyeballs. His real estate company is on the verge of bankruptcy. According to my contact, he has taken out loans using properties that don't belong to him as collateral. My land. Exactly. He forged documents to make it look like it's already his. He needs you to sign the deed before the lenders discover the fraud. The revelation was staggering. The successful businessman, the son who always looked down on me for my mediocrity, was actually a fraud on the brink of ruin. What can we do? I asked. We could report him for fraud, which would almost certainly land him in prison. Or, Raymond paused, we could use this information to negotiate. Offer him a way out that benefits both of us. Despite everything, I didn't want to see Ethan in jail. For 40 years, I'd thought of him as my son. Those bonds don't break so easily. I'd prefer to negotiate, I decided. The next day, we all met at Raymond's office, me, Raymond, the real estate developer, and finally Ethan. He arrived looking disheveled and shocked to see the developer there. What is this? He demanded. Mr. Vega here is interested in buying my client's land directly, Raymond explained. No middlemen. Ethan turned pale. You can't do this to me, he exclaimed, losing his composure. I have commitments, debts. You'll ruin me. The way you tried to ruin me? I asked quietly. Raymond laid out the evidence of Ethan's fraud on the table. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice defeated. An agreement, Raymond said. You will sign a document renouncing any and all claims to Vincent Miller's estate and commit to never interfering in his personal or family affairs in the future. In return, my client will not press charges for fraud. Ethan looked back and forth between us, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. Fine. He signed the papers. As he was leaving, he looked at me one last time. I always knew you weren't my father, he said with bitterness. No father of mine could be so insignificant. His words no longer hurt me. I saw him for what he was, a man consumed by greed and resentment. I wish you the best, Ethan, I said sincerely. I hope you find peace someday. He left without another word. We finalized the sale with the developer. My land was sold, and I was suddenly wealthier than I had ever imagined. What will you do now? Raymond asked when we were alone. Go back to Austin, I said without hesitation, to meet my son, my grandchildren, if they'll have me. 2 weeks later, I was back in Austin. This time, I wasn't there to watch from afar. Raymond had arranged a meeting with Sebastian at a quiet cafe. I was a nervous wreck waiting for him. How would he react? Would he believe me? At 4 p.m., Sebastian walked in. He recognized me from our brief encounter at the university. We meet again, he said with a friendly smile. There's something important I need to tell you, I began, my heart pounding. I took a deep breath. My name is Vincent Miller, and I have reason to believe that I am your biological father. His face was a canvas of shock. He was silent for a long time, processing my words. I laid out all the proof, the DNA test, Diane's letter, the photos. He examined everything meticulously, the academic in him analyzing every detail. This is unbelievable, he murmured. My parents, the Thompsons, they knew? Yes, I said softly. They were part of the agreement. He stared into the distance. I always felt different, he said finally. I didn't look like either of them, but they loved me, I'm sure of that. I don't doubt it, I replied. They gave you a good life, a good education. They made you the man you are today. We talked for hours. I told him about my life, about Diane, even about Ethan. He told me about his privileged but lonely childhood, his passion for math, his life with Mariana and their children. As the cafe was about to close, he looked at me, a storm of emotions in his eyes. I need time to process all this, he said. I need to talk to Mariana, to think about how this will affect my children. I understand, I said. Take all the time you need. I'll be here in Austin. I've bought a small apartment near the Central Park. Before we left, I gave him a small package. Inside was a simple old watch. It was my father's, I explained. Your grandfather's. It's the only thing I have of his. I want you to have it, regardless of what you decide about us. He took the watch, visibly moved. Thank you, he said. This means a lot. We shook hands, a handshake that somehow turned into a brief, hesitant hug. A week later, Sebastian called. He invited me to his house for dinner. I was going to meet Mariana and my grandchildren. When I arrived, I was so nervous I could barely ring the bell. Sebastian opened the door. He was wearing his grandfather's watch. Welcome, he said with a smile. My family is eager to meet you. I stepped inside and saw Mariana, Daniel, and Laura waiting in the living room. My grandchildren looked at me with curiosity. Are you our other grandpa? Laura asked bluntly. The one we didn't know we had? Yes, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. I am. Dad says you're very smart, Daniel added, and that you know how to fix things. I do my best, I said, smiling through the tears that were starting to form. Dinner was wonderful. We talked, we laughed, we shared stories. Sebastian and I found similarities that went beyond physical resemblance. Same gestures, same hobbies, same way of thinking. At the end of the night, as I was about to leave, Sebastian walked me to the door. My father, Arthur Thompson, was a good man, he said. He gave me so much, and I loved him deeply. But I always felt like something was missing. Now I know what it was. He looked me straight in the eyes so much like my own. I can't just start calling you Dad overnight, he continued, but I would like to get to know you better. For you to be a part of our lives, my life. That's more than I ever hoped for, I replied, overwhelmed with emotion. We hugged again, this time with more confidence, more feeling. A father and son, separated for 40 years, finally united by the truth. As I walked back to my new apartment, I thought about the strange path that had brought me here, about the lies that shaped my life for decades, and the truth that had finally set me free. Ethan was not my son, but I raised him as such, and that experience, however painful, made me who I am. Sebastian is my blood, but others raised him, molded him into the exceptional man he is today. Parenthood, I've discovered, isn't just about DNA. It's about love, sacrifice, and presence. And though I came late to Sebastian's life, I now have the chance to be a part of it, to know my grandchildren. to create new memories. At 68 years old, when many think life has few surprises left, I have found a new family, a new purpose, and a new chance to love and be loved. And in the end, that's all that really matters. If my story has touched your heart, I ask you to join me on this channel where I share real experiences like my own. At 68, I learned that it's never too late to discover the truth and start over. Subscribe to Whispers of Experience right now, turn on notifications, and leave a comment telling me if you've ever had to make a difficult decision for love.